Hey guys, as you can see by the video title, I didn't title this Why the Star Wars sequels Suck. It's actually rather Why They're So Disappointing. Because I think they could have been a lot better as a whole trilogy. And there's a lot of reasons why I'm going into in depth in this video. So, I'm not one of those Lucas purists that hated everything Disney's done with Star Wars. I liked Rogue One. I thought Solo was okay. I liked The Mandalorian's first couple seasons. And I definitely prefer Legends to canon, but I actually like some of the canon books that Disney has published, like Dooku Jedi Lost or Master and Apprentice. Even Tarkin was pretty good too. Those are just a few examples. But anyways, I'll start with the first film, the sequel trilogy, which is of course The Force Awakens, and I like it, and I still do, even though I kind of like it less now. When it came out, I was extremely satisfied and was dying to watch the next film in the series. People accuse it of being derivative of A New Hope, but I digress. Sure, in this film they blow up the giant thing, but it's not similar shot for shot. Then you could accuse Return of the Jedi for being a New Hope copy. It's not exactly the greatest argument. So let me talk about what I like about this film, though. The characters are great, and I think at least in this film they're all pretty well written. Rey is a scavenger who lives alone with previous combat skill in melee. Finn is really interesting because he's a defected stormtrooper, which is a perspective never seen before in a Star Wars film. And Poe is an ace pilot with a lot of charisma. Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo, is actually a pretty sick Sith Lord in my opinion, especially his outfit and his presentation as a whole. There's also Captain Phasma, who's basically great value Boba Fett. She looks really cool, but does absolutely nothing. I would have preferred to see her on the battlefield, shooting some resistance fighters or something, but she just kind of stands around. I want to go in depth specifically about Kylo, because his character garnered a lot of criticism in this film. Personally, I think his outfit is cool and his lightsaber is cool. I know a lot of people will criticize this character for not being as good of a villain as Vader, but I feel like those people are missing the point. The people writing the story knew that it was impossible to make a villain better or on par the greatest villain in cinema history, that villain of course being Darth Vader. So he deliberately designed his character to live in the shadow of him. Who better than his grandson? Having Kylo Ren as a villain also shows that whole tragic hero dichotomy that Vader had going for him as well, and I think that parallel is done pretty well. Lucas himself talked about how his films rhyme like poetry, and even though obviously Lucas didn't direct this film, I think this film is pretty well done in the context of Star Wars. It isn't so similar where he feels like a carbon copy of Vader, but it's enough of a compelling storyline that parallels Vader's. I mean, at least from the beginning. And obviously there's Snoke, but we don't really know much about him. I don't really have much of an opinion on him because of that. So now there's the old characters. Chewie's good old Chewie, pretty much. Han doesn't have the most satisfying story since he's separated from Leia. To be honest, I'm kind of upset about that, but it's a bit forgivable because Harrison Ford in general puts on a stellar performance. Leia seems so different, and her voice does as well. But I guess that has to do with aging. Although I think Harrison, despite his aging, sounded like classic Harrison Ford. I feel like Carrie Fisher could have done a better job. But overall, I was happy with the depiction of the old characters in this film. And we talk about what happens in the film itself. I was pretty happy. The opening raid of the village by stormtroopers was pretty interesting. Pretty interesting action. Depicted the brutality of the First Order since they pretty much massacred the whole village. Then the film gets kind of slow afterwards by introducing all the characters. But when Finn breaks out with Poe, that was kind of interesting to watch. Finn meeting Rey and fending off his First Order ships was nice to see as well. The Rift Rahr thing was kind of silly, but I think in a good way. In a sort of classic Star Wars kind of way. Not gonna lie though, Maz Kanata's Cantina felt like a cheap ripoff of the Maz Eisley one. The First Order raid of the place that led to a battle was pretty sick as well. You kind of saw infantry combat alongside dogfighting, and I thought that was presented pretty well. Then you get to the scene where Kylo interrogates Rey, and Rey somehow overpowers him when he attempts mind control. I guess this is where the whole Mary Sue argument starts, and while I agree it's not exactly logical as to why Rey was able to overpower him so easily, I don't think Rey overall is a Mary Sue, and I'll get into that later. But let's fast forward a bit. Han Solo dies. I think that was well done. It's a thing that's never occurred before in Star Wars films. It's straight up fratricide. It was obviously messed up, but it makes this movie bold in the sense that it can be dark despite being associated with Disney. Then the Resistance raids Starkiller Base. Rey simultaneously duels Kylo Ren. Kylo beats Finn pretty easily, but an injured Kylo loses to Rey. So this is a big talking point that the Mary Sue people use. How did an inexperienced Force-sensitive user beat a seasoned Darkside Force user who literally annihilated the new Jedi Order? And I think it's important to realize that Kylo had a bowcaster shot, basically near his lower lumbar region, which made him severely injured in the beginning of the fight. You notice this when you see how he's constantly beating at his injured torso. It's known in the Star Wars universe that if a Force user is dealing with immense physical pain, it's going to be even harder for that Force user to utilize the Force because it messes with their concentration, no matter how well experienced they are. I read that in like the new Jedi Order book, Dark Tide 1, and obviously that's Legends now, but the point still stands because you notice this in other Star Wars films with subtlety, or even just like blatant inferencing. So, for example, like Return of the Jedi, Luke cuts Vader's arm off. He's obviously insanely weakened after that. You also have to take into account that Rey has melee combat experience. You see it in the beginning of the film where she pretty much expertly wields her staff against multiple attackers. So she probably was used to doing that on Jakku. The skill is melee combat can pretty much translate to like the skill of wielding a lightsaber to a certain extent. And then obviously a culmination of these things kind of led to Rey's victory. Besides, I know I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but if Rey was a Mary Sue, she wouldn't have lost to Kylo in Rise of Skywalker. But we'll get to that later. So I've spent a good time praising this film, but despite the fact that I acknowledge it as a good Star Wars film, basically the only good film in the sequel trilogy, there's things I don't really like about it, and that is the premise. So, I mean, I feel like I always felt this way since the first time I watched this movie, and I just like had this question in my mind: how is an Imperial remnant faction militarized so successfully? How did the New Republic get destroyed so fast? Why is there a resistance? Shouldn't there just be an army for the New Republic? I get that Starkiller Base would have destroyed several New Republic outposts, but there should be hundreds, if not thousands of other systems that are a part of the New Republic. The entire premise of the film undermines the entire conflict of the original trilogy. Wouldn't the New Republic have been able to curb the power and influence of the First Order? How are they so powerful? It feels like the rebels died for nothing in the Galactic Civil War. Why are all the Jedi dead? Why couldn't the writers make some of them live? At least after Kylo and his palace slaughtered. Why couldn't Finn be a Jedi alongside Rey? That would have been way cooler, because the story arc is practically complete after this film. He's pretty much useless in the succeeding films. I feel like a better way to set up the entire conflict of the film would be that an Imperial remnant faction is rising. The New Republic and its army alongside the Jedi are fighting against it. I get that it's incorporating Legends elements, but these films already do that, just in a more shitty way. The entire sequel trilogy would have been better, in my opinion, if this was the premise. One final note is, retrospectively, I do not like this film as much as I liked it in 2015, because the way the sequel trilogy pans out, it makes this movie seem worse than it actually is. It's kind of like rewatching Game of Thrones, but you feel it's bittersweet, because the ending of the show was so poorly written. But that's all I have to say about Force Awakens. I know I kind of skimmed through the events of the film, but I don't want to make this video longer than it already is. So on to The Last Jedi. Remember how I said I was dying to see the next film? Well, I saw it and I wanted to die. I'm just kidding, but in all seriousness, how does film mess up so bad? I do not understand to this day. Fans and critics alike praise Force Awakens, and what came next was this heap of garbage, which was The Last Jedi. The only theory I have on why this film is so fundamentally different in the direction taken for Force Awakens is that a vocal minority of fans accused The Force Awakens of being too much like A New Hope. So they tried to subvert expectations, but did so miserably by making a film that makes pretty much no sense. George R.R. Martin once said, "If you write your story in a way that the butler did it, but then you make it that the cook does it, the story makes no sense." I'm paraphrasing here, but that's essentially what he says. And this is what sums up The Last Jedi. The first character that I just have to talk about is Luke. The film does blatant character assassination of Luke. He's such a good-natured guy in the original trilogy, and he saw the good in his genocidal father, and now all of a sudden, he's a hermit who lost all faith in the Jedi, and even tries to kill his own nephew, who pretty much did nothing at that point. Mark Hamill himself said he was really surprised by Rian Johnson's interpretation of Luke, because it's not logically consistent with him at all. Finn has no purpose in this film, and he kind of just dicks around. It would have been cool if he went out on that sacrificial suicide run, but Rose, who's another useless character, saves him. And before I get further, I want to get one thing clear. I have nothing but respect for the actors and the actresses of this film, including the actress who plays Rose. But she's such a useless character. I don't really understand why she exists. I think the writers could have incorporated her into the story a little better, because in the entire duration of the films, it seems she shows no purpose. It doesn't help that they shoved her aside, giving her barely any screen time in Rise of Skywalker. If you're going to introduce a character and mess up with its development, then at least flesh out your ideas and expand upon them. Don't just shove them aside. That's disrespectful to the actress and even to the fans. Next is Kylo Ren. He's basically carrying the sequel trilogy at this point. I don't really have anything negative to say about him in this film. I think this execution was really well done. Like, in that one scene with that dogfight where he sends his mother away on the command deck of the ship, he hesitated to fire. He clearly feels remorse in killing his own father. He doesn't want to also kill his mother. You can read all of that in that brief moment just through his facial expression. Adam Driver is a terrific actor. Then we got Rey, Chewie, Leia, Poe, and Admiral Gender Studies Professor. Rey in this film was well done for the most part in my opinion. I still like her character, and it was really cool to see her and Kylo team up against those Imperial guards. What was really annoying though is how Kylo Ren tells her that her parents sold her for beer money, and essentially that they are nobodies. We would find out in Rise of Skywalker that that wasn't true at all, but it seems like they really had no idea who they wanted Rey's parents to be. And that's a problem with these films in general, like I said. Lucas wrote his movies with a vision and overarching story, and despite the prequels and their flaws, you can really tell that there was a consistent storyline going on with them. And these ones were written like they were freestyled. Snoke dying was a good attempt at starting to subvert expectations, but the overall payoff of his death and the return of Palpatine basically make it incredibly dumb. They should have just kept him alive. Or he could have come back alive somehow in the Rise of Skywalker. I think that would have been preferable over Palpatine or something. I could have done a better job of this, and I don't get paid millions of dollars to write stories. Chewie is the same old Chewie, which is nice. Introducing Force sensitivity in Leia is great. And it was teased in Return of the Jedi, obviously, but the way it was done was kind of disappointing. She's just like floating around. I think it would have been cooler if we saw her use the Force against a bunch of stormtroopers or something. The floating thing was kind of dumb. Poe is the same in showcasing his hot-headedness and failure to be tactical by losing a big chunk of the Resistance fleet in the beginning of the film. It's actually like pretty good in my opinion, because it kind of shows like it's something that he would do. His anger towards the purple-haired professor or whatever the name was of that admiral for not communicating her plans to the rest of the crew to abandon ship is justified though. I mean, the Resistance was on a wild goose chase running from the First Order the entire film. She couldn't have told the crew the original plan to begin with. Why not? Also, I find the Admiral incredibly useless as well, because I really don't see why they could have just taken Admiral Akbar and let him get more screen time and let him do the suicide run. It's dumb because they gave him an off-screen death. A well-known and beloved character had an off-screen death, but this new one that no one knows about gets all the glory. It's pretty pathetic. I think this is partially because of Kathleen Kennedy's extremely flawed vision of Star Wars. Saying things like the Force is female and forcing in female characters is stupid. If you want to have a character, any character, regardless of gender or race or anything like that, they should serve a specific purpose to drive the story forward. Don't let them get in the way of already established characters for no reason at all. That's all I have to say about the characters, but I gotta say, this film is pretty boring. You have the space battle in the beginning. The movie evolves into just running away from the First Order. Seems like they were trying to emulate Empire Strikes Back, but they failed miserably. They even copy that one line when Luke was on Dagobah. Yoda tells him something about a cave, and he says Darkseid is strong in that place. Then Luke tells Rey the same thing on his island, and they both inevitably go to that place. Also, Empire Strikes Back is just much better. There's the battle on Hoth, the Luke Vader lightsaber duel. The Jedi training Luke underwent had more interesting scenes than the one Rey went through. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of boring stuff. The Candle Bite segment was really boring. The Resistance running away was really boring. The crate battle was not a fun battle to watch. Luke's astro projection was kind of cool, but I really would have just preferred if he dueled Kylo Ren. Like, actually. I think that the movie would have been way better if they just let that happen. Also, the Battle of Crate in general, like I said earlier, is just such a disappointing thing to watch. The Resistance could have had better vehicles and firepower to attack the First Order. This entire premise that the First Order has taken over the galaxy and the resistance is extremely weak is just pathetic. It makes no logical sense, and it's kind of like the original trilogy had no purpose whatsoever. That's all I have to say about this film without me ranting incoherently too much. Oh yeah, and Phasma is brought back again and just does nothing again and then just dies. So we're at the final movie of the trilogy, and of course it's The Rise of Skywalker. And I had high hopes for this film because I liked what Abrams did in Force Awakens. So I thought with him directing it again, it would have been a better film. But as soon as I saw Palpatine in the trailer, my hopes were kind of crushed. Again, it's like I'm kind of repeating myself. I'm sounding like a broken record, but it just feels like Darth Vader died for nothing, and the saga of 6 was irrelevant. There could have been so many better ways to write this film, and bringing back Palpatine was really just not it. Could have happened, and I'm just kind of spitballing here, is that Kylo Ren turns good, and the Knights of Ren take the helm of command at the First Order. It would kind of make more sense. The Knights of Ren were teased in Force Awakens. Fans were eagerly waiting to see what they were capable of on screen, only for them to just basically become cannon fodder, and Ben Solo basically wipes the floor against them. And the Rey and Kylo fight pretty underwhelming, but Kylo winning is nice. I mean, Leia intervenes, so Rey ultimately gets the last stab, but it's obvious that Rey isn't the alleged Mary Sue since Kylo beat her back, but maybe they made this happen because of the Mary Sue critiques of the first film, who knows. Finn doesn't really do much of this movie like The Last Jedi. He just kind of runs around watching other people do stuff, which is why I think he should have died in that sacrifice last film. And as I stated earlier, Rose is shoved aside, which is a dumb move. Because if you're going to introduce her, at least expand upon her as a character. Don't just kind of shove her aside. Chewie's the same, and I gotta say, Lando does not feel like the same charming, charismatic Lando as he was in the original trilogy. I mean, that's probably just aging like Carrie Fisher, but I still don't really get why they waited this long to finally bring him back. He should have came back at least the last movie. I get Carrie Fisher died, but I feel like Leia shouldn't have been killed off because there's no point to just always kill off the old characters. And Poe is alright. And the new characters in this film, whatever their names are, pretty forgettable and uninteresting. And the First Order defectors had an interesting storyline, but it wasn't that compelling or fleshed out. Exegol as a planet looks cool and is cool in concept, but it makes no sense to me how Palpatine was able to amass such a huge star fleet for decades, or even come back alive in general. The scene where he shoots lightning in the sky, electrocuting all the ships simultaneously, just looks really dumb, and doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And man, I can go on, but this movie just sucks. The pacing in this film is really bad as well. Like, they're at one place and then all of a sudden jump to another, and it's pretty confusing. The light speed skipping is just dumb because this plot armor basically saves him from crashing into an asteroid or whatever. Because Han himself said in A New Hope that he had to be careful with the calculations to avoid the very same thing when escaping Tatooine. They try to wrap up so many plot lines in rush manner, it just proves to show they didn't have a vision for this trilogy. I was hearing rumors Disney might can this and make a new one, and I just don't want that because I feel like they'll just mess it up again. See, I know all the stuff like Rogue One, Solo, Mandalorian Disney can do, but really have no faith in them executing an entire trilogy. Anyways, that's enough of my ranting. What do you guys think? How bad was the Disney trilogy in your opinion? Thanks for watching.